Okay, so first item on the agenda is called to order, which we did at 6:03. Thank you for doing that for me, Bill. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Carolyn's house is all lit up nice.
I know. I just threw the lights on
Echo off.
10 minutes ago for you guys.
Okay. If there's no changes to the agenda, the next item is approve the minutes of the 10:13 and 10:28 meeting. I could get a motion from somebody, please.
So moved.
Al moved. Who seconded? Doug? Okay, so we have a motion by Al, a second by Doug to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Oh, I didn't notice Ken had his Santa hat on either, and his beard. It appears as though the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Our next order of business is the big reason we're here is waiting study updates, discussion, and possible action. So as everybody knows, I hope, that way back when in the legislation, and Carolyn will remember this probably, there was a lady named Ann Manwaring from Wilmington who had been asking for years, where's all this money going that we're raising for education and how much of it's being used, and felt that it was unfair in her district in Wilmington and Whitingham, which is similar to a lot of our Windham Central districts, and asked that we look into how the money was distributed. And finally, after a few years of requesting that and it being in the, that there be a waiting study and it being finally put into the budget, it was completed last year, and it awoke a lot of people. And I know we've had several discussions about it, so I hope we don't need to go really any deeper than that for right now, but there is a waiting study that showed a lot of our more rural districts are being harmed, and there's some districts that are making out very well just because of the way the money's being distributed. So I know that Laura has been on before and Carolyn has been on before. It's been a topic of discussion at our executive committee meetings on Wednesday mornings that Dan and Doug at one time went and testified with Laura and Carolyn and some other people up in Most Peculiar. And so there's some interesting stuff going on. The city of Burlington and some people around there have picked up on the study also. And they are looking to maybe do some stuff. I know that Dan and Mark at the last VSBA meeting had a discussion about it, but I don't think they got very far. So I think what I'd like to do, Carolyn, I hate to put you on the spot. I was hoping Laura was going to be here.
Me too.
Can you kind of get us up to speed where it is legislative wise, and then Dan and Mark can talk about VSBA wise?
I believe we have settled on a final draft. I know I've agreed to be a lead, one of the lead sponsors, and that's what I know. And as Mark pointed out, I think draft 5.1 is the most recent draft. The other thing I will just tell you is that, like any other piece of legislation, this can go before a committee and change mightily. So, we have to kind of be vigilant about this. But I think it's a good thing. There were a couple of things there was one thing that made me a little bit nervous, and that was various people who have worked on this. I think Tammy Colby was one of the authors of the waiting study. She was suggesting that we phase in the poverty piece, and I, as I'm on a school board of a small school that does receive, for us, significant money toward our as far part of our revenue. I would not like to see the poverty thing element get phased in if the small schools grant doesn't get phased out slow at the same rate. So anyway, these are all details, and I'll I'll pass it over to Mark to give his report.
Okay, so Mark and Dan, why don't you guys do a little, then Doug will get you about the letter you wrote.
Dan, I'll let you give the report on the VSBA, but Rich, I put together a summary of the legislation, just point by point what it is. I can read that quickly if you'd like, so people know what's in it.
Would anybody? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
All right. So it implemented the recommended weights from the report starting in fiscal year 2023. And if you're looking at the report, it's the B as in boy 1 version of the recommendations. It mitigates the increases to municipality property taxes if the increase is equal or exceeds 20% of what it would have been under the old weight formula, and it's recalculated each year. If you meet that 20% threshold, in fiscal year 23, it would be 75% of the revenue raised due to the tax increase. In 24, it would be 50%, and 25 would be 25%, and then it would be full in 26. It suspends the excess spending penalty for 22, the year that we're budgeting for now. It maintains the Act 46 merger incentives. It repeals the small schools grant, as Carolyn was just talking about. It does some, because it's repealing the small schools grant, it does some technical changes. I don't think they're important, so I'm just going to skip over those. Let's see. It requires the AOE to calculate and report by December 15th, 21, the cumulative under and overtaxing for 2000 through 2018. It requests the AOE to identify the costs and student outcomes from inadequate funding for that same period of time. It puts in a moratorium on education tax system changes until the pupil weighting factors report is fully implemented. And it creates a joint legislative education oversight committee, which is made up of the chairs of appropriations, ways and means, and education. I'm missing something there, from both houses. And they meet twice a year through 2028. And the purpose of that committee is to monitor, evaluate research, oversee, and provide continuing review of matters concerning the implementation of the weighting formula changes. And the bill will get changed an awful lot, I'm sure, in committees.
There are also, Mark, too, I don't know if people remember, too, there are some, the tax impact, if there had been full implementation, those were floated around last year at some different points. And it really is like Act 60 in this district originally back 25 years ago. It has different effects on different towns. Stratton, it will increase their taxes pretty substantially. Dover, it increases us a little, but it decreases at Wardsboro more than our increase, so it's kind of a wash. Carolyn, I don't remember what it does to Windham. You may remember.
I've heard varying reports.
Okay, and I think everybody else it'll actually give them some more money to spend if they didn't touch the taxes, or they can put more towards capital spending. So that's why we wanted to have this meeting to discuss it, because it isn't a great thing for everybody. So Dan, you want to go ahead, Al?
Just wanted to ask Mark, what report were you reading off of?
Oh, I wrote that up based on.
Oh, you wrote it. Sorry,
I wrote it. I can send it to everybody though.
Will you please?
Be great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, and
You got it, Peter.
Peter too.
Yeah, Peter, yeah. So really all I can add to that is that Mark has done a nice job of a synopsis of what Laura came to VSBA and spoke about when she was there just last week. Basically what she's trying to do is incorporate into her bill mitigating factors so that nobody gets clobbered with this right away, so that there's a sort of a step down from it, a phase back and a phase in. And her point was that this this is going to have a lot more likelihood of passing if everybody's taken account of. You don't just say, okay, you got to take all the money that should have gone to, Wardsboro and give it all to them this year. That ain't never going to fly in the legislature. So that was her point. That's why there are so many things built into this that allow it to be, basically able to pass, I think was her point. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to what Mark was saying. All of these things are attempts to make it more palatable to everybody. And I think I happen to agree, as does, of course, Laura is completely on board with this, but most people in this region as well, and Mark and I are the VSBA regional reps, essentially all schools in this region have been negatively impacted by the current weighting study. So that's the reason, as a regional VSBA member, I'm supportive of it as well.
And just as where Dan was going, and I believe Dan was here, and I know Carolyn was, and that may be it. When they brought Act 60 in, they also phased that in over 3 years. And one of the things I was talking about at our executive committee meeting on last Wednesday is, that's where in Dover we took full advantage of the weighting of the phasing in, because it said your taxes are going to go up so much anyway. So we made sure our budget maxed out where we were going to be in the tax rate, and then any surplus went into our reserve. So, in the 3 years phasing up to it, our taxes doubled, but we also, put away over $1 million that we, lived off of for the last 20 years. So that's something we're really going to have to pay attention to if they phase this in. For some districts, you may want to, put some money away. In other districts, it's going to make a difference how you spend. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. So one of the things as Laura and Carolyn and any legislator will tell you, and any politician except for school board members, that if you write a lot of letters, it always helps, and it helps the legislators understand where we're at, and it helps them argue for bills. So one of the things we wanted to do was, Laura had asked for, was a lot of letters. So Doug, being the wordsmith that he is, wrote a very nice letter that we'd like to see if Windham Central would be interested in sending to the legislators, our senators, our representatives, the different committees. So Doug, can you maybe read that to us or go over it however you think is most appropriate?
Yeah, I don't think I want to read it. I think it was distributed earlier, and I think you gave the gist, Rich. Basically, last 2 executive committee meetings, we all sort of got together, and I just basically volunteered to craft what the executive committee kind of wanted in a way, or the majority of the exec committee. And I just basically stuck to 3 bullet points, which was 1, explaining what we wanted, which was simple changes to the weighting that currently exists. I didn't call out the Sibilia bill or proposed bill or anything that could possibly come down the pike. Just simply focus on the fact that we want change, however that comes, whether it's phased in or not. I sort of disagree with a little bit of what Rich said. I feel like, at least Marlboro has promised its, taxpayers that we're going to lobby and fight for this. And letters are a part of that. I feel like nobody's going to make any change if they don't hear from us. And so, whatever comes out of this committee, Marlboro will be following on the heels of it with more letters and more push from its actual constituents, and likely to also ask for, those committee member email addresses when they're appointed, if they are already. I don't know if they are. Maybe Carolyn, if they're there yet, but I haven't been paying attention. But if they are, then we want to send it to them directly, the same letter, and a version of it from ourselves as board members, a version of it from the taxpayers as well. So, like I said, I stuck basically to the general gist of we want change. We feel like this hasn't been enacted. It was meant to be enacted in 1997 under Act 60, and it's basically unlawful what they've done. I talked to Bill a little bit about this. It's not unconstitutional, but it's definitely unlawful because they created a law that said that they're going to figure out and adjust weightings from time to time, and they haven't looked at it for over 20 years. So that to me just is unfair. And this also couples a little bit in there with the excess spending threshold that districts who have been penalized are also paying on top of this. So, Marlboro probably, as an example, wouldn't have a $79,000 excess spending threshold this year, wouldn't have had a $200,000 excess spending threshold last year. Those are really the only 2 years that we've been hit in the recent era, I think, with an excess spending threshold, but we've always been forced to hold beyond that. But now we're looking at cutting programs in addition to capital improvements. So all those things factored in are just, begging for change. And I feel like at least our district, for writing this letter, we put in a few examples, or I put in a few examples of what we're dealing with. But if, the committee wants to amend it to add their own, I think that they should.
So to answer your question, Doug, we do all have our emails. It's the same formula, even for the representatives elect. So, it's cpartridge@leg.state.vt.us.
And the committee members have been assigned yet or not?
Committee members have not been assigned.
Okay.
But the emails are the same. And so you can send, emails to your representatives.
Yep.
Go ahead, Keegan.
Thank you. So this question is really going to be for Carolyn, and I'm only relying on you based on your experience as a lawmaker, right? Change is typically very slow, and when people opt into let's get behind this, these are some really wonderful things that can be offered, change does not often happen quickly. Is it a safe bet to bank on this bill passing as it's written to get rid of the excess spending or not the excess spending penalty? Will these things actually happen in time for the budget votes in March? Or is this we really hope it's going to happen? My heart concern is we've had this information, this thing has been implemented since 1997, and we're always hoping maybe next time. And granted, this year we did have a pandemic. Is it safe to say that change can happen by March so that our voters can have a true understanding of what their property tax rate is going to be, so that the budget is a true reflection of what a community can sustain? Or is this one of those let's hope and see with no real guarantee?
Well, Keegan, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm pretty hopeful because this is the first time that we've actually gotten the weighting study done, and there's legislation that's drafted based on the weighting study. That this 5.1 is, that's pretty good. Is there resistance to this? Absolutely. There are towns that are going to take a hit. I can remember, this is before I was in the legislature, but when the legislature did Act 60, taxes, they phased in our tax increases. Well, the taxes in Windham went up 40% the first year and 30% the second year. So it was a serious hit. Of course, we were paying very little because we have few students and lots of taxable real estate. But I'm hopeful for a few reasons. I don't think you can bank on this, but I'm hopeful because there are towns like Burlington, like Winooski, that will potentially benefit from this because they have a large population of children with English as a second language, for instance. And I think there's a certain level of poverty in those towns. South Burlington, Essex, they're probably going to hate this. But, I think that we've talked to leadership, and I made it pretty clear at some of our caucus meetings that this was one of my top priorities. Not that, I'm all that important, but I chair agriculture, so I'm part of that leadership team. But at any rate, it's, we're going to work hard to try and make it happen, but I'm going to tell you there is resistance.
And Rich, can I chime in just a bit here? I wanted to say, Keegan, also that the whole Brattleboro SU is discussing this. actually coming up later tonight, and I'm going to be leaving this meeting to go talk with them about VSBA specifically. But I was going to mention whatever Windham Central has done. I think it would be important to be able to mention to them. I'm pretty sure they'll sign on with Burlington and everybody else, but it really, it's starting here in terms of a movement of some kind, I think, thanks to Doug.
In the River Valleys, at our last meeting, we voted to have Rick Thorpe is going to be our representative. They're going to reach out to the group in Burlington and to kind of keep track and try to, get involved with them also. And I know some other boards have talked about it. Let me go to Mark, and then we're going to see if somebody'd like to make a motion.
So the group that Burlington put together, the coalition, is meeting tomorrow night. They've put out a proposed resolution that boards can take up if they want to back them. I've got that. If you can read it, it's something that we may want to consider jumping on board with them. But they are meeting tomorrow night. If anybody's interested, I can send you the link for that meeting.
Mark, if you can send that out with your thing that, with that little summary you did, please.
I don't know if I have it yet.
Oh, okay.
But if I do, I will send it.
Okay.
Otherwise,
we
I'll
won't be
send
able to attend, but we have our own board meeting tomorrow night, but definitely send along the resolution wording, because Marbo did pass last week our own little motion to essentially support this letter and future action. So.
Okay. So would anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that that we approve the letter written by Doug for being sent to appropriate representatives and senators, be signed by our board chair.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second. This is Dan.
Okay, so Mark made a motion, Dan second. Peter, do you have that? You
Done for.
Okay. So Mark, you get first discussion, Dan second, then Allison, you get third.
I just want to thank Doug for putting it together. I think it's an excellent letter.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't really want to argue. I think, Allison, I think you know where we stand on this, but I am encouraging people to think regionally and statewide. And I really think that the poorest and most rural students in our state will benefit from this. And that's what I would hope that legislators would keep in their mind as they look at this here.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of allude to it in the letter. Sorry, Rich. I should be recognized.
Yeah, and I did get Allison say she could go next, and then I'll get you, Doug.
Okay.
That's okay. Doug can finish his thought. That's fine.
Oh, go ahead, Doug, then.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in the letter, maybe not in the letter, maybe somewhere else, but I just feel like this is one of those right side of history moments. I feel like this is inevitable, and I feel like pushing it down the road just makes people hurt a lot longer than they need to.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. I realize that I am in a vast minority here with how we are being negatively impacted by the waiting study. And I want everyone to know, first of all, that, the executive committee has been extremely sensitive to my position and Stratton's position, and we absolutely appreciate that. But this is like kind of, I guess, my opportunity to make sure that everyone knows that it's not necessarily Stratton sort of stomping our feet, not wanting to pay additional taxes. It's not that we don't see the value in this, and obviously there is a flawed formula here that needs to be corrected. We see that, we appreciate that, we understand that, and as a mom, my kids go to these schools. The problem that we would just ask our SU, who represents, who works with us and represents us, to consider is that right now we're sort of looking in a microscope at this waiting study and its impactfulness on the equalized pupil count and what have you. but we have our very own tax burden that is unique to us and that is not felt throughout other districts. And this weighting study came out, and I think it kind of picked a scab sort of for people in my community, because this label of Gold Town is very challenging for us, because the majority of people who live here are like me. You know, we don't have pockets lined with gold, and we have this situation with the equalized pupil count that, while, you know, you look at the weighting study and you see, oh, we haven't been paying our taxes the right way for all these years, we have this other situation that's happening that's very unique to us, because we have a problem with maintaining our student flow, our influx level, because we are a choice community, and we have no choice but to be a choice community because of the way the geography of our community, and we don't have a school system to kind of soften the blow with this stuff. And 2 years ago, we had a local private school market themselves, and our taxes went up 46% in 1 year, and then it was back down, and then it goes back up, and it goes back down. So we have our own particular set of burdens. And so when this weighting study came out, it made it look like we've been getting rich, sitting kind of like in our ivory tower, almost getting rich off the backs of some of these communities who need this money. And I just want to make sure that you all know that that is not an accurate depiction. And with everything that's happening with COVID and how these chips have not fallen yet financially throughout the state with that, this is huge for us. I mean, this is going to come right down the pike at the same time that some of that stuff happens. And I would just ask you to consider that before our own SU sends this letter out in support of something that is going to really, you know, sort of hurt us far more than it's going to benefit a lot of others, that you would maybe consider sending these out on district levels and maybe not at the SU level. Again, certainly it's not that we don't want it to happen or that we don't think it should be corrected, but when it comes directly from our own SU, that hurts us when we look at this from the other perspective. So that was the only thing that I wanted to say about that. So thank you for giving me my probably more than 2 minutes.
No, board members get more. So just so you know, though, Allison, too, and again, some of you, I think, you know, probably Carolyn will remember, and I know Dan will, because he and I had a long discussion about this. You know, when Act 60 first came out, we also had Windham in our district. And Windham decided to privatize in there, and we all know what's happened to Windham over the years. In Act 60, there was 4 gold towns in Windham Central. There was Dover, Windham, Stratton, and Windham, and I think the 4 of us, those 4 towns were going to contribute almost 60% of the money into the shark pool. It was brutal, and so I definitely know what you're talking about, Allison. And Dover stomped our feet and jumped up and down, as did Wilmington. Dover didn't send our Act 60 payment for a year. We couldn't get a lot of traction with that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, but one of the things that I've come to realize is, and if Emily was here, she would be harping on this, is we need to look at it that all the students in the state are our students. And so I think sometimes that's how we're going to have to approach it. But I do agree that the problem with the way we fund education based on property wealth is because I know I've worked 3 jobs my whole life. Dan MacArthur's probably worked 5 jobs his whole life. And, you know, everybody struggles to make their tax payments, you know, and, you know, Vermont isn't a house in a 1 acre land or half an acre like in some cities. You know, to me, Vermont's a house and a barn and a farm on, you know, 10 and 20 and 30 acres. And it seems as though we get penalized for being in the country more. You know, and we don't have it as bad as like Whitingham does, or you know, some places like Halifax, which are how Whitingham was a gold town just because of the power company. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. So we definitely hear you. But again, I think too, if everybody was getting their fair share, including, you know, Stratton and all the gold towns, you know, I think it would be, it would make a lot more sense. And if there was more wealth in the Windham Central too, would help all the schools and all our students. It would give, and it would give towns like Stratton that are total choice, maybe some more different schools to choose that allow those schools to be better, and allow like Leland and Gray to compete with Burton when they advertise and they go after all our students to go over the hills. So, but I definitely hear you, and I think everybody does. Keegan, you're next, and is there anybody else? And then Mark, I'm sorry, I missed you earlier.
So I'm just looking for a clarifying question. Is the goal, or one of the goals of this new legislation that's being put through, is the goal to remove the penalty only? So like if you've got like your equalized per pupil spending threshold, like it should only cost, $18,000 per student to work out evenly among all school budgets, and then you have that additional tax on, like, I think it's like 127 or 125% per dollar over that threshold. Is this speaking to only removing just that added penalty, or is it removing the threshold entirely?
So what happened was with Act 60, they were trying to come up with a formula that would work through the whole state. So they said it should cost X number of dollars to educate a student, whether they're in Burlington or Brattleboro or Halifax, Marlboro, or Stratton. And then they said the tax burden should be very similar for all those towns too, so that when you raise $1 for a student's education in any of those towns, it's the same burden. So what they did was they very quickly realized that it's a little bit more expensive in some of your smaller districts, which are usually your more rural districts, because obviously you don't get the scale. So in Brattleboro, they have 3 fifth grade classes. So if 5 new fifth graders move in, it's no big deal. But in a smaller school, like in, say, Windham, if all of a sudden they had 20 new students move in and they were all in one grade, that could really increase their tax rate because they'd have to hire more staff. So they came up with this weighting with a small, or they try to correct some of it with a small school grant. And the small school grant was supposed to recognize that, if there isn't enough students. And then they played around with how much they were going to give you per student, and on the weights with special ed, with high school students with English as a second language, and poverty. And so they've assigned different weights. At one time, a high school student, we got 1.5 percentage points for, I'm pretty sure the first couple of years, wasn't it?
I think it was 1.25.
Oh, and then it dropped. I thought it dropped. What is it now?
1.13.
So they kind of dropped that. So the numbers, they've been playing with these numbers for a long time. So it's not just the thresholds and where you get penalty spending, but it's also the amount of money that comes into the schools. At one time, they were paying 50% of all transportation, and then it was 50% up to a certain amount of money. And there's been numerous things that they've changed over the years. So this is looking at weighting for all different parts of the education, this bill. So if you really need to read the bill and read the summaries of the bills. And Laura put out a really good thing. Laura and Carolyn and the gentleman from Wilmington they had a meeting at the town hall in Dover, and they had a really good summary sheet of what the weighting study said. So Keegan, that would be something really good for you to get hold of. And
I agree. Where would I find that?
Bill, can you send that out to everybody again? Do you still have that somewhere?
I don't, but I can ask Laura to get in touch with Keegan probably directly. That's probably the easiest thing for me to do, make that connection.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Is that okay, Keegan? Does that take care of you?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go Mark and then Doug, okay?
So a few things. Keegan, the bill that Laura has drafted would only suspend the excess spending threshold for fiscal year 22.
Oh, it's only one time?
It's not a permanent fix. There are other legislators that are working on proposing fixes, but this bill would not do that. What I'll do is, for Keegan and anyone else, I'll send a link to the executive summary that was included with the bill. So you don't have to read the whole 150 pages of the bill. And I'm sorry, not the bill, the study, which is a really good summary of what's in the study. So I'll send a link to that. What I was going to say was to Allison, one of the couple things I didn't mention that is included in this bill is telling the AOE to look at districts that are non-operating and ensure that they are only spending what it costs to educate a student. So the idea was if districts are getting overcharged for it because they could. So that may help a little bit. That's it.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of, because this is on the record, I just wanted to speak a little bit to the numbers. So Allison mentioned this might hurt, I think, less people than it's helping. And I'm going to disagree with that statement, only because when I look at the numbers, which I also looked at last March, there's a pretty clear Excel sheet that calls out all the districts and it calls out their potential, I guess, unjustness or whatever it is. I don't want to call them savings because they're not. They're opportunities for kids and students. But I only counted at that time 110 districts that would have a 10-cent tax difference and above. Some of them will be 45 cents. And that's 110. And the total in Vermont that I'm aware of right now, I think is 264. So that's 40% of Vermont school districts that are impacted by this, which is not a small number. That's a third. It's over a third.
I'm sorry, Doug, that wasn't what I said. If that wasn't clear, I apologize. What I meant was that Stratton, from what the numbers are, if you look at across the board for our SU, it looks like we are going to be impacted to a greater extent in the negative than any of the districts in our SU are going to be impacted in the positive. That, if that wasn't clear, that was what I had said. I apologize.
Right. I think that you're correct in that. When you look at this chart, though, if you even compare the districts that are going to win to the districts that are, quote, going to lose, I guess, that's what they're calling it, or terminology, for lack of a better term. I don't think it's a good term. I think it's just simply how are we going to equally divide this stuff? If you look at all those districts that have a 10-cent or more I guess, addition to their school versus less, you're going to see less actually with those greater increases. So some of them are going to be nominal changes for people. They're going to be like 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent. I think there's probably less people that are going to see large increases like Stratton than there are more. They're going to see huge, decreases. So.
If we're all set, Al, Clausen, you're next, and I think and then Carolyn.
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo something Doug said earlier about the excess spending threshold. I think we felt it a little more than Marlboro has for the past few years, and it definitely has had an effect on our programs, our ability to continue with programs. It's led to us having deferred maintenance and a variety of issues. And then, with the pandemic on top of it, it has just really come to a head. And now, as Keegan is very well aware, with our upcoming budget, it's just we are at a crossroads, and this has to be resolved. And I would love to believe that Karen will help to push this through, and that, yes, we'll be able to wipe out that excess spending threshold for this year. That would be a huge help. Do I think it'll happen? Hard to say. Can we bank on it for our people that are going to be bearing the burden of the taxes? We can't count on it. So over the next months, we're going to have to be making difficult choices because the waiting study, we can't count on it. Wish that we could. But and who knows, maybe if this pandemic hadn't happened, and when Doug and I and others went up and testified in March, just in the just before this happened, maybe we would be much further along in this, and maybe actually have the excess spending threshold taken care of for this upcoming fiscal year. But at this point, we don't. So yeah, tough decisions ahead.
So I want to just point out that the way students are weighted now was something that these are numbers that just got pulled out of the air 22 years ago, 23 years ago. Elementary school student will be weighted as 1, high school student 1.25. And the deal was they put those in place, and as Rich pointed out, they instituted the small schools grants because they realized that when you're basing your formula on per pupil spending, there's a strong disadvantage for small schools, which are, which do not have economy of scale. But this study was supposed to be done soon after that, and those people who were happy with the study left it. There was no incentive to change it. So I really applaud Ann Manwaring for her fortitude in moving forward with this. But the numbers that they're coming up with are they're going to hopefully more accurately reflect some of the variables when it comes to teaching kids in rural areas, et cetera. And, somebody asked me earlier how Windham would fare in this. And I've seen runs where it says that Windham's going to benefit. Windham's going to stay the same. Windham's going to be disadvantaged. But at this point, I want to support this because I think we just need to get to a fairer situation. I've heard what you said. Windham has dealt with all of the same sort of things, including, having excess being over the penalty threshold because of pre-K special ed, which is not reimbursed at the same level that K through 12 is reimbursed. So that's another bill that I'm going to offer for people to sign on. But why in the world, how can you make a policy decision that says, no, pre-K special ed should not be reimbursed at the same level as regular special ed? Isn't it advantageous to nip things in the bud and get to kids early, and to spend outrageous amounts of money for pre-K special ed and not get some kind of reimbursement at all? I just think it's unconscionable. So anyway, I see Laura there. Are you in the witness protection program? Anyway, good to see you, Laura.
And that makes a lot of sense because, that's one of the things we found in Dover. We instituted early ed, the preschool and full day kindergarten. That's when our special ed funding, expenses went way down. And it is almost amazing that they don't recognize that. There's so many studies out there. So, Keegan, I'm going to let you go. And then, Dan, when do you need to bail on us?
I should probably go about 7 o'clock based on their agenda. So if we could hold this vote in the next, 10, 12, 15 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Keegan, and then Laura, if you want to talk, and then we'll see if we're ready to vote.
Thanks. I just have two other questions.
Keegan, you're really quiet, too.
Am I?
Yeah, it's hard to, and I noticed Carolyn had to get closer to her computer, too, when you were asking her a question.
I'll try yelling. We'll see if that works. Okay. So I'm curious about the weighting study. Did that weighting study take into account the projected declining enrollment numbers, like projected over the next several 5 years, 10 years, 15, along with the data related to the projected aging demographics of our citizenry of Vermont? Is it taking into account we have more and more older people that will likely be living on a fixed income where coming up with tax increases will be challenging? at the same time, we have a steady decline in school-aged children. Did the waiting study take that into consideration, or was this only to refigure how do we assign dollars from the ed fund to different schools?
So, may I, Richard? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
Laura, I'm sorry.
So the weights are really, if you have a pie, how does the pie get divided? How do we weight all of the people that need a slice of pie? How do we determine how big of a slice of a pie they get? So it is, you can shrink the pie. You can make the pie, a 6-inch pie. You can make the pie a 60-inch pie. The weights are still important. So when you're talking about demographics and taxing, that's not really related to that issue. That is more relative to if you get the weights right, if we determine the correct size of pie that each child should have, you can more equitably reduce the size of the pie if you were interested in reducing taxes, or you can more equitably invest or increase the size of the pie if you are looking to change outcomes.
And one of the things I think too, we talked a little bit about the penalties and the expenses. So, one of the things I argued with Peter Shumlin about with Act 60, all their projections were that all the high spending, the gold towns, would keep spending at the level they were. All the receiving towns or the poorer towns that were going to take money out of the shark pool were going to keep spending at that lower level, and that everything would work out. And what happened was in the first couple of years, the high spending towns created ed funds, they cut their spending, they did things to not send as much into the shark pool or the sharing pool. And those towns that had, were going to benefit by, they spent more, therefore taking more out. So what the state did was, and then there's been different governors who have tried different things. They've tried to control spending because, Keegan, kind of where you were going to is, everybody says, wow, we've got so many less students. Why is the spending going up so high? And it makes no sense. So, a lot of the excess spending penalties were there to try to control spending. And they were good attempts, I guess. I don't know. But it's like anything else in legislation. When we had Madeline Kunin selling us the foundation plan, which killed Dover at that time too. She actually came to Dover and spoke at the Dover Elementary School. And, it was like I think her comment at that time was every 10 to 20 years, we should completely throw out the education funding and start over again. For Act 60 and 68 to last as long as it does, it's not a bad piece of legislation. I don't think it's gotten the attention it's needed. And I don't think they followed the true intent of the original law. Somebody was mentioning about it being not illegal, but maybe not proper. One of the things and Peter Shumlin told this, I'll never forget, we had a gentleman named Buzzy Buswell who said to Peter Shumlin, who was the Senate pro tem at the time, saying that we have a transportation fund that's only supposed to go to the highways, but every year you rob from that to balance the budget. How are you going to promise us you're not going to steal from that? And Peter Shumlin said, we have a part in the law that says if any money from here goes to funding anything other than supervisory unions and school districts, the law goes away. It becomes illegal. Well, every year they would steal money from the ed fund into other things that were all good, the state colleges and the science programs. And 5 times I got Dover to bring a suit or to challenge it. And the legislature said, oh, for this year, we'll change the law so it's okay for now. So I think that's part of it's the big picture too. It's not just the weights and it's not just the excess spending. It's kind of the whole funding formula together. And you have to look at the whole thing. I'm going to go to Doug, and then if we could, maybe after Doug, we could have a vote or call the question because I don't want to lose Dan. I feel it's important for Dan to be.
Yeah. I agree with you, Rich. I mean, I'm going to just say one last thing, which was just mentioned but not followed up on. I get the fact that COVID has happened. I get the fact we're in a pandemic, but I feel like just like all the other things we're looking at as the time for the future, now's the time to make changes because things are going to be a mess. And I feel like it's an opportunity. It's actually an opportunity. If you can see it as an opportunity, that's going to be helpful along the way rather than later on, make changes now and then make changes again. Why not just start from scratch with this? So that's my last piece, and I guess I can call the question.
Okay. I got a quick question for Bill. Carolyn, have you been voted to be the Windham Central rep to the?
I'm the Windham vice chair, but we haven't voted for me to be a voting member.
Okay. Laura, I know too, you're not a voting member, but, and I did ask you to come on because I was hoping you'd be here a little earlier. Is there anything, we're going to vote on, there's a motion and a second to send Dan's letter on behalf of Windham Central. Did you want to make a quick comment?
So I apologize for coming late, Richard, and I just want to thank Doug. It's an excellent letter. I want to thank you and Bill for your attention to this and Dan's advocacy at VSBA. I think this is an important issue, and I think we have a lot of support around the state, and I think that taking this action is necessary and helpful.
Okay, so we had a request to call the question, but I don't think there's anybody else ready to speak, so I'm going to go off page a little bit and just say, are you ready to vote, everybody? Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, do we need to reread the motion or are we all good?
So, Rich, you should probably do a roll call just for posterity's sake.
Hang on, Bill. I'm going to take care of this. If you're all ready to vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Is there any opposed?
Yes. Aye. No. Nay.
Okay, so I'm not seeing a unanimous vote here, so I'm going to go through the list. I'm going to start on the bottom and work my way up. Allison Young, how do you vote?
Nay.
Dan MacArthur?
Yay.
Doug Korb?
Yay.
Thank you. Keegan?
I'd like to abstain because I don't know enough about I don't know enough about this to make an informed decision. So with all due respect, I would like to not vote.
So you're going to abstain?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Ken McFadden?
Aye.
Joe Winrich?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Al?
Yay.
I have 6 ayes and 1 nay. Chair's vote goes with the majority. There'll be 7 ayes and 1 nay. So it appears as though the ayes have it by a 7-1 majority. The ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. I know that was not easy, and I appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness in the discussion. And Doug, again, thank you for your letter. And Mark and Dan, thank you for everything you do for us guys. Bill, I think we also just had district review real quick. Was that, I can't find my most updated agenda.
Yeah, it's okay. Just a quick HVAC update. Just want to let you guys know that Medina is on it, and everything has to be done by the 30th. We continue to give updates at every board meeting, and there are some particular challenges right now because there are 8 of the engineers from Alliance Mechanical that are quarantining, and so we are pushing it as fast as we can, and it looks like Efficiency Vermont is going to be a little bit flexible if we're in the middle of work to be able to go ahead and invoice it before the 30th of this month and allow it to be finished afterwards because of conditions beyond their control. But it's looking pretty good across the entire SU, and we're looking at close to a $500,000 investment for the SU. I just want to compliment all of you who were part of the discussion to create the Director of Operations position. I think it has definitely paid for itself.
And you've got several applicants for the new one?
Yes, we are doing interviews on the 22nd, and Dan MacArthur is representing the boards on that interview committee.
Thank you. Dan's gone, I think. We still have a quorum. I got to say, too, guys, you know, with this new setup, the quorums, we're not fighting to get quorums for Windham Central meetings. That's really nice. I can't tell you how many times in the old days we'd have 14 people and be waiting for that 15th person to show up. So if there's nothing else, remember, guys and girls, the days start getting longer, so we're headed towards spring, so we're closer to spring and summer than we are next winter. I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but it's going to be probably an interesting night. So I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday, and I would like to see, we do have an executive meeting on the 23rd at 9:30, I think, Bill?
That is correct.
And we have no Windham Central meeting set up after this.
Not until the spring.
Okay. So I would love to hear those magic words.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ken.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho.
You look the part very good, Ken. You just need to put a little weight on like Ken and Ken, like Joe and I. So almost be
well, I'm working on the beard. I'll catch him.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you guys all. Like I said, have a great holiday.
Happy holidays,
Thanks. Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Yeah,
Bye, everyone.
take
Happy
care.
holidays.